When I was a college student in Charleston, South Carolina, a Category 4 hurricane was on its way, and a mandatory evacuation was in effect. My roommate, Catherine, said I should leave town with her, but my boyfriend, Donnie with an H, said that we should stay for his art. "Come on, we have to go. The last buses are leaving," Catherine screeched at me as I sat next to Donnie on his couch. "It is imperative that all residents evacuate immediately," the governor reiterated on TV. It was 4 p.m. on a Thursday, and Hurricane Hugo was picking up strength and speed in the Atlantic. It was due to hit Charleston in a matter of hours. I knew this would happen. All right, thank you. Common sense, the law, and my parents, who thought I'd already gone, all screamed, "Run." I started to rise, my heart pounding. Donnie stayed seated on the couch, painting his fingernails blue. He looked up and said, "Would you really turn your back on this experience?" I thought you were different. Donnie was the kind of artist who used his own urine to oxidize metallic paint. Warhol, you know. He was so interesting, and being with him made me interesting too. He was the perfect antithesis to my parents' Southern sensibilities. "He's not the kind of boy who usually dates girls, is he?" my mother complained. "He wears a barrette in his hair," my father objected. I could either stay with Donnie and ride out what would be the most destructive hurricane in history to that date, or I could run from the 20-foot wall of water that was due to hit the city, the highest storm surge seen on the eastern seaboard that century. It was a tricky trade-off. But I was too proud to let my survival instinct overpower my identity, and so I stayed. We cooked up a pot of spaghetti and poured it into a gallon Ziploc bag, as one does when preparing for a hurricane, and took refuge in a second-floor closet. Soon the power lines outside began to snap, and our closet went dark. When Hurricane Hugo made landfall around midnight, September 22nd, 1989, it was loud, really loud. We huddled together as 140-mile-an-hour winds ripped off parts of the roof, smashed windows, and blew furniture across the room. 10 inches of rain slammed down. I gripped Donnie's arm as the closet door rattled in its frame, as if it might tear away from the hinges. And then all was quiet. Was it over? No. The eye of the hurricane was passing directly over Charleston. "Come on, let's go," Donnie exclaimed and grabbed my hand and led me outside. We stood on the sidewalk in the dark stillness, surveying the destruction all around us. Birds chirped in the torn palmetto trees, and a leaf fell gently to the ground. "Shall we take a stroll?" Donnie asked. I looked at him in disbelief. What? Well, how much more of this experience did he need? It was then that we heard the approaching roar of the hurricane wall and ran back inside. The next day was the most beautiful day I'd ever seen, crystal clear and sunny, as if the hurricane had wiped the air clean and left $7 billion in damage, 65,000 homeless, and 35 dead on the ground. I went for a ride on my bike, and Donnie stayed to make a sculpture out of found objects. I rode through knee-high floodwaters on my bike, past a giant sailboat that had blown onto the road from the river. It was there that my parents, watching in Alabama, saw me on CNN. I called them from the only working payphone I could find, and they said, "You're not with that boy, are you? And why are you still wearing that miniskirt?" I didn't understand. Was CNN not reporting the true extent of the damage? Did Donnie and the miniskirt really matter? I told them everything's fine and went on to my apartment. I lived above an art gallery on the main retail corridor through town. By then, the looting had begun, so the National Guard was posted there. I talked my way onto the street. only to realize that my keys to my apartment had broken free of my belt loop on my miniskirt while I was riding. So I pedaled over to the fire department and convinced the firefighters to drive me home in their truck and lift me up in their ladder into the second-story window of my apartment in my miniskirt. And they said sure, and had no problem, standing diligently at the base of the ladder, looking up while I climbed slowly to the top. I grabbed some keys, spare keys, and some clothes, and that evening, Donnie and I gathered with others at a friend's house. There was no power, or no running water, and our spaghetti was almost gone. Donnie said, I feel like Andre Breton and the Surrealists in 1920s Paris. We waited for a friend to return with food, outrunning the police searchlights, looking for those violating the new curfew. All the grocery stores were still boarded up, and the only restaurant to have reopened was gouging the prices of its bagels. The nervous excitement I had felt at the beginning of the storm had turned into gripping tension in its wake. So I did what I always did in times of stress. I cleaned. The next day, we returned to my apartment, and I began scrubbing the stove, because nothing says hurricane cleanup like a sparkling stovetop. I scrubbed and scrubbed and scrubbed, and that's when Donnie rounded the corner of the kitchen, wearing my miniskirt. He said, what do you think? Maybe another day I would have told him, you look pretty good in a miniskirt. But this day I said, are you crazy? We're out of food. The city is on lockdown. Take it off and help me. As we stood in the bright stillness of my apartment, destruction all around us, Donnie raised an eyebrow and said, Oscar Wilde appreciated a good cross-dresser, don't you? Then I heard the sound of the electrical cord ripping out of the wall as I grabbed the toaster oven off the counter and threw it at his head. He cleared his throat and said, you missed. He wasn't interesting to me anymore. Thank you.